I I could have saved them. I could have saved them all. If I had just killed that boar or taken a shorter path. I was here to protect the village, protect my family. They killed my innocent wife and child. Why? Doesn't matter why. I'm going to find them and make them suffer. Hunt them down. Suffocate them in their own blood. Cut their heads off. Let the animals feast on their corpses.
Matthew couldn't stop speaking to himself, his voice hollow, lost between exhaustion and rage. He had spent the entire night searching for the villagers' bodies, digging graves, one after another. His hands had gone numb from gripping the shovel for so long, but his task wasn't done yet. Now, he stood frozen, staring at the only two graves that mattered. Emma and Anna lay wrapped in white cloth, side by side, just like when Anna would wake up frightened by thunder, seeking shelter in her mother's arms. Matthew's face was lifeless, buried with his family, losing his soul piece by piece with every shovel of dirt he threw over them. When it was done, he collapsed to his knees, wanting to be close to them one last time. Before leaving, he reached into his bag and pulled out the wooden mug, the one Anna had painted for him. He placed it beside their graves so that in some way they could always be together. With a broken heart, Matthew whispered his final goodbye. And then the hunt for revenge had begun. Matthew stood at the edge of the ruined village, the weight of his grief pressing against his chest. The air was still, heavy as if mourning alongside him. His sharp eyes scanned the road, searching for anything, and then he saw it. He ran his fingers along the outline of a deep boot print. They were fresh, headed straight for the jungle. His jaw tightened. He rose slowly, his gaze following the path disappearing into the dense jungle ahead. His fingers curled into fists. His steps were silent and practiced, his gaze sharp as he followed the trail. The silence was unnatural. No birds, just the whisper of leaves shifting in the wind. The jungle path opened into a small clearing where an old wagon sat abandoned. Its wheels were half sunken into the mud. The timber it carried remained untouched, left behind in haste. Matthew slowed his steps, his eyes scanning the ground. Broken branches, scattered footprints, signs of a struggle. Not far from the wagon, beneath an old tree, the body of the wagon driver. His throat had been slit ear to ear, his face frozen in agony. Blood had dried in a dark pool beneath him. Matthew's jaw clenched, his fingers curled around the grip of his knife.
Damn killers.
He buried the driver's body under the tree and continued following the trail. At the end of the day, under the moonlight, the hunter found his prey. In front of him was a small bandit camp in the middle of the jungle. He climbed a tree to scan the area. Small tents surrounded a bright fire, each with 2 bandits sleeping inside. 3 armed guards were stationed at different corners of the camp, watching over the jungle. Matthew created a plan for a silent attack and waited for the guards to get into better positions. When the bandits were far apart, unable to see each other in the dark, the hunter drew the string, took aim, and fired without mercy. The arrow hit the bandit's neck hard, helplessly trying to breathe. He couldn't call for help. The shot froze him cold. Matthew quickly fired another arrow, piercing his chest and dropping him dead. After he was finished, Matthew climbed down from the vantage point and slowly got closer to the second guard. From behind, the hunter fired 2 fast shots, one after another, at the bandit's spine and the back of his head. Extreme pain paralyzed him, sending him falling to the ground, face first. Sticking to the shadows, he watched the last guard singing while taking a piss, thinking about the ways he was going to make him suffer. Matthew distracted the bandit by throwing a rock next to him. The bandit turned his sight from the hunter's direction to check on the sound, and Matthew quietly approached from behind with his silver blade drawn. He covered the bandit's mouth with his hand and sliced his throat open. Blood splattered into the darkness. He rapidly shoved the knife into his stomach with anger. It's about the pleasure of revenge. After Matthew was satisfied, he threw the bandit on the ground and spat on the lifeless corpse. The hunter wiped his blade of the warm blood and sneaked into the enemy's camp. The remaining bandits were still in sleep and didn't notice the deaths outside. Matthew entered the first tent, where 2 thugs lay on either side. He slowly knelt next to them, and with his fast and trained hands, he tore their necks open and butchered them like animals. Then he stepped outside, going for his next target. The cold hunter moved to the tent in the middle. Inside, the layout was the same as the last one. But when he put his knife into the first bandit's body, the man started resisting and moving around in shock. His feet hit a pot and broke it, waking up his friend. Before Matthew could act, the now awakened thug started shouting in fear. Matthew snapped the first bandit's neck, and before the other one could reach his sword, Matthew threw his blade at him, landing deep in his skull through the eye. But it was too late. The camp was alerted.
What was that?
Loud voices came from outside. Matthew rushed out. 2 armed men stood on the other side of the camp, next to the fire. One of them was twice the size of Matthew, holding a big sword with an angry face. The other seemed different from the bandits Matthew had encountered. Dark blonde hair and cleaner clothes, whispering orders to the brute.
Who the fuck you supposed to be? A damn coward, killing my men in their sleep. You're already dead.
The leader said. Matthew told them.
I will give you a countdown from 3 to surrender.
The bandits laughed at him.
3, 2.
Before finishing his countdown, the hunter grabbed the bow under his cloak and fired a shot at the big man before he could act. The arrow landed in his chest, dropping him to his knees. The leader watched his man suffer on the ground in agony. Furious at the sudden attack, he charged at Matthew, swinging his blade. Matthew dodged the first strike, but the second one cut his arm. The bandit smiled with pleasure and went for a deadly blow. Matthew moved just enough for the blade to miss the mark, grabbed the bandit's hand, and from below, shoved his knife into the leader's stomach, twisting it inside, making him shout in pain. Then, Matthew pushed the bandit to the ground, onto his knees, hopelessly holding his gut to stop the bleeding. The leader said,
Wait, don't kill me. I have money. I will give it to you, just...
Before the bandit could finish his sentence, Matthew slit his throat. Blood poured out of his mouth. The shock in his eyes was priceless for the hunter. Matthew stood up and cleaned his blade. All his enemies had been hunted, but he still wasn't satisfied. He wanted answers. Inside the leader's tent, Matthew saw the bag of coins the leader was talking about next to some papers on that table. He put the coins into his bag and started looking into the papers. One of them grabbed his attention. The name of his village was written on it. A small piece of paper with instructions.
Target, Windhurst. Payment upon completion, Willow Creek. R.B.
Matthew's grip tightened. A direction, a name. The hunt wasn't over. He folded the note and tucked it into his belt. He tended to the wound from the standoff with the camp leader, and just as they had done to the villagers, he chopped the bandit's head off and mounted it on a stick to rot, a deserving punishment. Matthew stepped into the shadows to fulfill his revenge, no matter the cost.